Hey guys, Tom here from Metalloud, and welcome to part 4 of the Say Anything review series. This time we're looking at 2009's self-titled album.
Think I care. You humans can't see what pretty music came to be. I see what you...
I'll always consider Say Anything's self-titled album to be a kind of start of a new era of things for the band. The first album found them going through high school, normal high school bullshit with cliques and girls and just, adolescent love and rejection and the feeling of being an outcast. Is a Real Boy kind of continued some of those trends, but it was really kind of more Max Mimas kind of finding himself as a songwriter. The song structure and things greatly improved over the first album, and it was filled with a lot of drug-fueled, vivid imagery in it. In defense of the genre, saw things more polished, bringing in some pop elements. There was a much more diversity to the sound. They had tons of guest vocalists on there, so many different styles of music that were on their show tune-ish stuff. You had big band sounding stuff, you had pure pop punk, you had some indie rock, you had some electronica. There was just so much going on that album, and it was so polished that it really kind of stood out. There was 2 whole CDs that they gave us, but it was a different direction than Is a Real Boy because of that. It started pushing more towards the pop sound that Is a Real Boy kind of hinted at, but still kind of stuck with the rough, do-it-yourself kind of indie rock style of things. Their self-titled album kind of continues a trend of In Defense of the Genre with the pop sound and the polished of it. It's toned down a lot more. It's definitely not as, diverse or as ambitious as In Defense of the Genre was, but it's definitely a more catchier album. There's a lot more thought into the hooks and the choruses, and you have songs like Do Better, which is probably one of the poppiest songs that they've ever written. I mean, it's almost a purely pop song. It's also kind of a new era for Max Mimas himself because he's no longer addicted to drugs. He's found love. He's kind of coming into himself really and maturing a lot on this album. And unfortunately, that's something that kind of a lot of people don't really gravitate towards instead of the kind of self-loathing and feelings of being an outcast that were portrayed by by In Defense of the Genre and Is a Real Boy. That this is kind of him finally being comfortable and happy, and there's still a lot of the aggressiveness that was in the previous albums that we've come to expect. Songs like Hate Everyone or Death for My Birthday in particular. It's a very dark song. Mara and Me is probably this album's Admit It, where it kind of takes on fake, everybody being just fake, and including himself too, which is something I've always liked about Max Mimas' writing, is that if he's going to attack somebody outward or attack groups of people or ideas or anything like that, he never just leaves it at that. He never does a whole holier than thou attitude. He's always looking inward, and that's something I think that no matter what we can all relate to. Is you kind of start to realize that the feelings that you have outwardly negatively at other people, groups, or anything, a lot of times can be applied to yourself in that kind of sense of hypocrisy. And that's something that Mara and Me really deals with well, I think, on this album. You have some tracks like Less Cute, which is again kind of a poppier, sappier thing going on there. The opening track's kind of cool, and it's almost acoustic-y. That's not a word, but I'm making it up. And it's a nice intro to the album itself, and it's different than things that we've heard before. And it leads right into Hate Everyone. There's some more softer, like ballady acoustic songs like Cemetery on here, but just overall, it's a much more poppier album. It's got these hooks, it's got these harmonies, and it's got a sense of polish to it. Everything feels layered properly. The actual fidelity is very good, and it feels like it was written in a studio with guide and help, and oh, you should put this here, you should structure like this. It doesn't have any of the overly long intros like Is a Real Boy has or Baseball has. Even In Defense of the Genre had a few of those. It doesn't have any of the kind of quirkiness that those other albums had. It's a much more straightforward album. And like I said, I mean, there's a lot of lovey-doveyness on here. This is where I believe he got married to Sherry at this point. They might have been getting married, but so there's a lot of that. I mean, even at one point explicitly he mentions her name. So if you're not looking for that, I can definitely see how you might be turned off by the content of the lyrics and things like that. However, the actual structure of the lyrics, the potency of the lyrics is still definitely there. This is still really Max Bemis making fantastic songs lyrically and musically as well. There's particularly, like I said, Mara Me is probably my favorite on here, especially the change up towards the middle of it, which sounds like something straight off of Is a Real Boy. And then there's just a lot to like on here that I think a lot of people kind of overlook on this album. I think it's probably out of their entire discography, this is probably the album that gets overlooked the most. And it's unfortunate because there is a lot on here that you definitely would like. I mean, this is probably actually, if I had to pick a favorite Say Anything album, this is probably the one I listen to the most, and this is probably definitely my favorite, I would say. It's kind of a toss-up because I like Is a Real Boy for different reasons than I like their self-titled album, but that's neither here nor there. This album really, like I said, kind of takes Say Anything in a different direction that was hinted at within Defense of the Genre. In Defense of the Genre had at least a toe still in that rough do-it-yourself indie rock style of Is a Real Boy and even Baseball. But our self-titled album just goes full-blown with that, full polish. And again, I get how it can turn some people off if you're not used to it, if you're looking for another Is a Real Boy, something like that. But it still has a lot of the elements that we come to expect from Say Anything. The other reason I say this is the start of a different era is because there's kind of a point where I believe Say Anything, particularly Max Bemis, because he's the one's mostly writing everything, really started to kind of lose some of that chaotic nature that made their songs interesting. And some of the structure of the songs kind of just feels lazy or simple or forced at times. And this is kind of where you start to see that, like the song Young, Dumb, and Stung in particular, which starts off really kind of dark and awesome and then just kind of doesn't do too great, I don't think. It kind of, like, the actual chorus of it feels just kind of weird, a bit childish in a way, as far as in the structure of it. It seems just too simple for what they've done in the past. But it's kind of a minor thing on here, but I think it's kind of something that continues on from this album. Thankfully, again, there's plenty of great songs on here. Property's another great song, told from the perspective of basically an abusive boyfriend who's controlling and manipulative and just a horrible person. And that's something Max Bemis always does well, and I think it shows mostly on this track, is writing songs from different perspectives as well. Like the song Less Cute is actually written from the perspective of a girl and who's, found somebody she loves and is kind of rejected and then settles for someone else who's just a less cute version. And I think he just does a really good job with putting himself in different shoes and writing songs from that point of view and doing it in a way that really kind of connects with you, and just, again, vivid imagery that really makes you see from the point of view of the characters that he's writing from. So overall, this album is definitely, again, a popular album. It's as polished as In Defense of the Genre. It's more toned down than that. It doesn't have all the guest vocalists. It's only one CD. It's not as diverse. But there's still a lot to love. It's still got a lot of that darkness and that self-loathing and things that Say Anything was really good at portraying in their previous albums. However, it also kind of pushes more into love and things like that, and redemption. And for that, I can understand how some people just might not be into that. That's understandable. It's a different, completely different lyrical style or content that you may not be. You may not be at a point in your life where that's what you want to hear, or you're not going to gravitate towards it. Some people might be turned off by the poppy nature of it. Honestly, when I first listened to it, that's where I was. I wasn't really a huge fan of this album because of that. It felt too much like a pop album, but over time, as I've listened to it and kind of understood what's beneath the surface of the songs, I've liked this album a lot more. So there's definitely a lot to enjoy on this album as long as you give it a chance.